Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with Andy Lipson, and today we'll be discussing how has the service industry has been affected in the midst of COVID-19, or as most people call it, coronavirus, and how it has personally affected us as the host of What's Left. And if our viewers are watching this, they can see that we are three-way on Skype, and this seems to be what life is like. For at least for this past few weeks, for a lot of people who have been quarantined, and not just. Well, we'll be discussing how the service industry has been affected, but our personal story really is in relationship to what is happening around this country in the USA, what's happening in the States, and in the global community, really. There are a lot of people, I'm sure that both of you and our viewers and listeners who know people who are doing conference calls, working remotely, being affected by their jobs, facing massive layoffs, the economic recession looming, and as well as a lot of our young people being affected by the educational privatization of wanting to do online learning, which we'll discuss at a different time. But for now, all of this, what I'm mentioning though, is just in the midst of this chaos. So let's bring it back home though, and we'll be discussing it with specifically with our co-host Kenny Zepeda, and we have here Andrew Lipson as well. I'm sorry I didn't mention both of you. I'm not the only one doing this. So can you both say something, say hi, just for our listeners who are listening on podcast?
Well, I'm glad to be here with all of you, and I miss sitting on the same couch.
On our cozy couch.
Yes.
Kenny.
I don't know. No, I do. Obviously, a lot of our freedom of movement has been reduced, for various reasons, and it's definitely affected life, personally, my work life, my relationships, and my community work. It's definitely changed things, and I'm curious to see what this is going to go, but I think right now we're trying to focus on what's happening, like actually at the moment, and how we got here, maybe. But I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Well, you had said, I had said that I wanted this episode potentially to be about the coming wave of online education and what that means, and I do think we can talk about that later. But you've had a number of things just happen at your work in the last week, so maybe start with that.
Well, yeah, we knew, you could see, so the volume. I work in the restaurant industry, in a restaurant. I am on the floor in the front of the house. I work as a manager and a server, so we are used to the fluctuations of the year of labor. After January, New Year's usually slows down a little bit. February is usually a very good month for everyone. But this obviously was unexpected. By March, we're usually back into the swing of things in the restaurant industry. And I think just about, any bartender, any server, cook, any manager, any small business, big business, they know this ebbs and flows of the cycle, the business, or this in the restaurant industry. And to a degree, also the hotel industry. Any service is really related to, tourism and, just volumes of people increasing. So, last week, we knew, we've heard news. We knew that something was coming to the U.S.
Maybe before we start, can you say a little bit more about who works at your restaurant, the makeup there, the kinds of folks that are there?
So my restaurant is a small one. It's like a mom and pop type of place. It's not a corporate, restaurant by any means. Very small staff. Maybe like on a given night there's like 7 people, including cooks. 7, maybe 8 cooks, prep person, bartender, busser, runner, 2 servers. So it's very small compared to other restaurants. And just like any restaurant in San Francisco, many of the kitchen staff, they're from Latin America, various countries. And that's really, anywhere in San Francisco. And the front staff is usually people that obviously speak the language, and also are more connected with the culture of the restaurant culture. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any other follow-up questions to that.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the general makeup. We people from all walks of life, young people, as young. Some people are in college, trying to pay through school. Other people are artists, so they work in the restaurant industry to be able to support art. And there's people with college degrees. But they prefer to do this because it allows, at least when it's good, it allows a degree of freedom. You're not working 9 to 5, and you have a little more flexibility in your life to pursue other things. Yeah.
And how long has the place been there? And how long have you been working there?
I've been working there for about a decade. I was very young when I started. I left. I came back. Again, it's like a family. This place, I would honestly say it's like a family. A lot of people, the turnover is usually not very high. Most people end up working there at least 5 years. We joke around that we're basically unionized, because you really have to do something real dumb to get fired from this place, and it's also a collective effort. It's not, for example, like tips are pooled. It's not like in other places where everyone's on their own and trying to, basically competing with each other for volume or for competing, for getting tables sat. Here, everyone pulls together. Everyone gets a little bit of the money, and so I've been there about a decade. The place itself has been open for 14 years, which is an achievement in this city. Mm-hmm. In San Francisco, most places don't make it past 2-3 years, because it's basically big money that's taken over the market. And so, just to give you an idea, to open a place in San Francisco now, or at least until recently, just the liquor license is about $200,000 to $300,000, just the liquor license. And then you have other permits, rent, payroll, stock up. And so you're talking about at least a couple $1 million to open a place now. So this place stands on its own. It's a success story, and it's being threatened by what's happening big time in like many other places.
I have a question, Kenny. There was a PBS NPR poll that was done that it was that nearly 1 in 5 households have already experienced a layoff or work reduction due to the pandemic. How much approximately are people getting paid? Are they getting paid at least minimum wage? Because there has been a fight for at least a $15 minimum wage nationwide for this country. So I'm just wondering if people are, this is the service industry, if they are not able to pull through with even just the wages that they make already in the restaurants and their tips, and already facing the massive layoffs in the service industry in the midst of the coronavirus, are people at least getting paid the minimum wage here in San Francisco, which I think is 15, no? Ahora?
15.69. It's 15.69 in San Francisco at the moment.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
So, just to give you an idea, San Francisco, I think, you can go and search your own, and make sure this is the right number, but roughly San Francisco has over 3,000 restaurants. Big sizes, small sizes. It's a pretty significant way people make a living in this area. It's not just San Francisco, because a lot of the workers that have gotten pushed out because of gentrification, high rents, they've been pushed out to the East Bay, so they commute to come and work here. I know of places where workers come from Richmond, which, for people that are not from the area, It's like a 45-minute ride, on the train, on the underground train. I mean, it's also like $8 to $10,
Yep.
in fare. But so they're willing to come here because there used to be, at least until recently, a vibrant, economy, and we have been protected by the tech industry. There's a lot of big money, a lot of young kids that want to go out, that have money, that come out of college, and the tech workers. And so the industry, like 2008, we were hit, but not as hard as other places in this nation. So because I was working at this place actually in 2008. And yes, there was obviously like a decreasing volume, but it wasn't the existential threat that we're literally experiencing right now. And so when you're asking me about workers, most people, I would say, in the restaurant industry, they don't have a lot of savings. Most people, as it is, the restaurant industry do not hire full time because some restaurants don't want to pay the healthcare because it is a big burden. It eats into their profits. And the truth is that a lot of small places in this city are not making a lot of money. No one's getting rich. I can attest to my restaurant. No one's getting rich off my restaurant, even though the prices are relatively high, but that's just the conditions of this city. And only the big businesses that are able to, charge, absurd amounts of money for a cocktail, $15, and also they have economies of scale, where you can produce, mass produce, and then, or bargain better prices, wholesale from different, providers. That's how you make money, but small restaurants are not. And so we go back to, again, the people, the individuals, the workers. Most workers are basically paycheck to paycheck. Most workers have a job and a half at least. One job is not enough, and to be able to afford a $1,200, like to rent a room in San Francisco, on average, is $1,200 to live with other people.
There's a housing crisis in San Francisco. Some people pay $3,000 for rents for a flat, or $1,200 minimum, I suppose, right? I mean, and we're talking about people who are being pushed out as well, no? Do any of your colleagues?
Most of my colleagues live in the city. They haven't been pushed out, but they do have a job and a half or two jobs. And just speak of their industry as a whole. That's this industry in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in this nation, depends very much on the undocumented workers that are willing to work for just very close to the minimum wage. And they're the ones who have to have a job and a half or two jobs. And they are workers that are contributing, obviously paying taxes, but they're not going to see any unemployment benefits. Mm-hmm. Once right now that we are asked to be on quarantine and no restaurant is open, I mean, some restaurants are offering takeout food, but obviously that needs minimal staff. And in the case of my place, we're scrambling to keep people employed, as much as we can, but truth is that it's not enough. And we have just started this. Again, last weekend, you asked this question earlier. Last weekend, before the quarantine was official, we knew what was happening in Europe. Things were escalating. The volume of people the local government, the state government were giving, recommendations for gatherings. So we started to see, that number decrease, and we knew it was coming for us. So big venues, started concerts that I had to go to. They canceled that I wanted to go. Sorry, but then we knew they ended up closing bars, and we knew what's coming for restaurants, and without volume, we're nothing, and so the crunch started last weekend to us, not this last week, not this Sunday past, but the one before that one. People were stopped. The volume of people decreased maybe by 2/3, and we knew some tough times were coming. We didn't expect to be where we're now. We're basically, most of us are unemployed. we there are on social media a lot of friends of the industry. I've noticed people started GoFundMe pages to support their staff at their work, uh, and because again, uh, we are all in a very precarious situation. We you know, I'll be okay. I can apply for unemployment, but not many other people can. This industry.
Mm-hmm.
You had said something about how some people were being laid off in order. Some people who had, I guess, benefits first. Talk about that.
So again, we are in an industry that's people that work in unionized places. Again, a lot of people have two jobs. I know of people that like one of their main jobs was unionized, working for hotels, and that was a highly sought after gig in San Francisco. To be a cook at a hotel restaurant, you can earn like $35, and have very good benefits. That's not that's decent. That's not greatest, but it's decent, and you would think that you have the protection of unions, right? And or that there's something to fall back on. But some of those workers in San Francisco were the first ones to be laid off or furloughed. How do you pronounce that? Furloughed. Because that's what we're all hearing, basically, the same story. We're going to basically fire you, and then we're going to rehire you, once things get better. But the truth is that we don't know when better is going to be. Because, even if the quarantine is lifted in 3 weeks, there's going to be a lot of economic damage because we are not just workers, we're also consumers of this industry. And so you can see how this vicious cycle can become a snowball and just grow. And we don't know how many restaurants are going to come out of this unscathed. Rents are pretty high for restaurants too. They are having to give away the stock that they had because you cannot hold on to food, for 3 weeks.
Can you say specifically what's been the decision and impact at your restaurant?
So we're trying to do the to-go thing. Our bosses, again, they're as much as they are capitalists, they're small capitalists. They're nothing. They're closest to us. And this is one of Marx's things, right? That they're closer to the proletariat than they're closer to to the big capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
So they're closer to the institution, losing everything, and being unemployment than making it out of this. So they are trying to share the hours, spread the hours that we have, the work hours. But again, just doing to-goes doesn't require a lot of staff. And so they're scrambling to stay afloat because they care. And they have what, in total, maybe like 15 lives, 15 families. They want to make sure, continue to make a living and afford to be in this city. And so, they took tough measures. We decided to close one day. We've never done that. We were always open for 7 days a week. We decided to close one day, but then that quickly moved to, obviously we were mandated to close, period. So then we have to scramble to find alternative ways to make a living. But then you're also subject to the big capitalists because in this city there's also the ones that are raking it in right now are Grubhub, Caviar. These are big, capitalist institutions that are squeezing small businesses before this happened. So now they're making a killing because they take a big chunk out of that of the delivery fees.
Right.
And so the people that are able to access these meals to be delivered are people that are better off. So I bet you most of the workers that have sustained this industry, most of the workers are not ordering in. And so it highlights this disparity, that we have in this city.
And a lot of our workers that are working in the service industry don't get paid sick leave, no? So if they don't get paid sick leave during this pandemic, not everyone in this country, right, And if they don't get paid sick leave in this country, I feel as if we're trying to supposedly halt or stop or pause from the country being so-called contaminated through this coronavirus pandemic, then what we need to do is have a good look at the way that this system is working and seeing that it's not working for all of us, because if we don't take care of our workers, right? Because it goes in a tall order. We get rid of people, right? I feel as if the workers, in this case, with the personal experience that you're sharing, then it affects the rest of us, because we have to get food from people, right? Like at McDonald's, at Wendy's, at Jack in the Box, so people who are working there. And if they don't get paid sick leave or they're not getting the right healthcare system, then we're affected as well. I think that we are to experience even more greater sicknesses, diseases, and viruses in the future. And this is sort of like a window into the future of what it would look like and how capitalism is not working and how it could potentially really screw us up in the future if we're not careful, given what we are facing right now. Our workers are the ones on the front lines. And imagine if there was a greater pandemic, greater one than this one, and they have to forcefully go to work because they don't have paid sick leave, then they're spreading all of those viruses and diseases to the rest of us. And I'm just calling out how our frontline workers, that includes the service industry, don't have the benefits of paid sick leave, don't have the benefits of a good healthcare system, don't have the benefits of a savings account with money extra for cushion, don't have the benefits, because we live in, as the three of us, at least I consider myself to be anti-capitalist and you two as socialists, but we don't live in we live in a capitalist system. That's what I'm pointing out to. I'm just away just from everything you're talking about. I just feel that is what I'm present to.
I mean, it's highlighting the pillars of capitalism. Like, think about private property, for example. A lot of us that are early employed or unemployed, we are deeply worried about paying rent, making rent. And in turn, even like the landlords, they're also, if they're not getting rent from some people, they can make their mortgages. And so, and it goes up, businesses can make rents, and people can make payments on their houses. And so, houses is a fundamental human right. And even that we don't have. Even before this crisis started, I viewed a lot of us workers in this area, at least in San Francisco Bay Area, as landless peasants. We are landless peasants, and it is fully exposed right now. Most of us don't own property, and so what's going to happen if most of us can't afford rent? Mm-hmm. How are we going to organize, and say, fuck this, you're not going to kick me out. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that, we are not ready for that in some ways, but sorry.
What has been the response by your coworkers to what's happened? How have they dealt with this or tried to deal with it?
It almost feels like a lot of people are dazed and confused, to quote Led Zeppelin. It's so soon. This moves so fast. Like, if you think about it, so Sunday we had a normal shift, if you call it. We had service, we had people. By Monday, they said we can't open anymore. By Tuesday, we were like, you cannot open anymore. All you can do is to go food.
Right.
So this is very recent. The dominoes just started falling. The chips are just, we don't know how far it's going to go. And as it is already, to maybe connect it to my work in that community, we've been scrambling to secure food for so many people right now. Because again, just a few days of not working, have started a mass need for food, for meals. And we're talking about 3 weeks of not working.
Yeah.
And this is just the first few days.
Right.
It hasn't been a week. So everyone's out of answers, and at least if you were to look at the bigger picture, a lot of people are without answers. Some people have funds to last maybe a week, 2,
Right.
Maybe a month. But if this is gonna go beyond a month, the financial aspect. Even if the sanctions are uplifted, this is gonna take some time for people to recuperate.
Right.
So I think people are just scrambling, trying to see if somehow they can find work in another place. But this is en masse. This is everyone in the industry affected. I don't think most people could see this coming ever in their life.
And that's why I guess there's been this talk in the federal government. Trump has talked about essentially the universal basic income kind of approach, where there's talk of sending sending all people who are citizens, all adults who are citizens, $1,000, and then maybe $500 per kid. But as you said, there's definitely a set of undocumented workers who are working and have been doing work in places who that's not going to help them survive.
Yeah, there are 10 to 12 million undocumented people in this nation. Maybe not everyone's on the labor force, but that's a decent amount of people. And this is going to affect, again, construction, the restaurant industry, just all the service industries, So, yeah, the impact is pretty big, and it is exponential, I think. It's, and we can't measure it now. It's just like any crisis in capitalism, you can't see it until in retrospective.
Mm-hmm.
You may be able to, shit is coming, but we don't know how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
Even I saw the unemployment applications, they had 200,000 in a matter of a few days or something like that. And again, this is the first few days of people not being employed.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's also only the people that can apply to.
Right.
So if 200,000 people, maybe add another third of people that can apply for, so that's what, almost 300,000 people, I don't know, without a job in the first few days.
Right.
And this is going to fall, it's going to pull other industries down.
Yeah. Well, there's been both a supply issue going on, but then a demand issue where the demand for services has been just brought down by 70%, 80% by virtue of people not being able to move and not being allowed to congregate.
Yeah. And that also speaks to us becoming a service nation, right? And not a, kind of outsourcing and bringing production to other nations. And that, I'm not making a nationalist argument. It's just a fact, right? We've socialized the methods of production for the world. And it's, it's the virus has come to expose the fundamentals of this nation, and how labor is pretty fucked.
Well, yeah. I think I read a book that talked about how actually the level of manufacturing in the United States has stayed relatively it stayed relatively high, but what's happened is the number of workers who do that job has been diminished as you've had increased efficiency and technology and robots and things like that. So actually, it's still a country that is a manufacturing center. Obviously, China has been, competing with the United States and then Europe and other places. But no doubt that the number of jobs in just that manufacturing sector has gone down and down and down, even though the productivity of an individual worker has actually increased. So those are some of the things I've read about.
And just to jump off that, I think that's another aspect that I think about the industry. That people, some people assume that the quarantine is lifted, we go back to normal production. And what always happens in any crisis is that the economy or economic adjustments, whatever, the worker ends up doing more work, for the same pay, basically. And so they're not going to rehire everyone. As much as benevolent as they want to be, if they want to survive in even a small business, they cannot rehire everyone right away. And they are going to demand more from each worker, to survive. And then that the incentive for them is not to just, flush the system with workers. Yeah. It's not. So it's going to adjust to, again, be more efficient. Mm-hmm. And that means more work for less workers.
Yeah. Well,
and so that means less jobs for people.
Yeah, I mean, officially, we're not in recession. That's the word that's being bandied about now. Global recession. Supposedly, you need 2 quarters of negative growth and things like that. But I think we can see that there's something going on that is very similar to 2008 when the last recession hit, and that's what a recession is. Is basically production cannot continue as normal, so there has to be a mass either set of layoffs, a mass restructuring the economy to bring profits back. And people knew there was a correction coming, and now I think the pandemic has kind of tipped the global economy to the point where it's screaming, and it looks like workers are going to pay the price unless we do something.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. It just, to me, keeps showing again that the savagery of this system, and how it can never prioritize life. That's why I'm not a reformist. The simple fact, again, in San Francisco, many people can afford rent. If they lose their job, they won't have health care. A lot of the workers. So when you need it the most, you can't have it. Health care, for example. And it's just I find it incapable. Again, so long as production is entangled with profit, we can never prioritize life. Mm-hmm. And again, we've talked about it. Why I'm a socialist revolutionary, and this is one of the reasons, because I just don't see how for example, Spain, like the Spanish government just nationalized the hospitals, understanding the massive crisis that is coming because. Hospitals are, under capitalism. They're in the business of making money. And we see it in America, in the U.S., of how expensive healthcare is here, ridiculously expensive. And I don't know.
Yep.
I'm thinking about the families as well that have been affected by this. I'm sure many families. I used to work at an elementary school, and so many of our families were part of the service industry, whether that be housekeepers, or they were sometimes construction workers, or they were restaurant workers, or if they also, they just belonged part of that industry. And anytime we had a furlough, Andy, do you remember those furloughs we used to have?
Yep.
Anytime we had those furloughs, parents would come to our school and they would say, I don't know where to place my kid. I have to go to work. They already had set the times or the days they could miss for Labor Day or other holidays that were already listed on that SFUSD calendar. SFUSD is the San Francisco Unified School District, or any academic calendar, right? But they hadn't foreseen the furlough days. And furlough days, if Andy, you can just quickly say what's a furlough day.
It was just a way for people to say, you're not going to get paid. We need to reduce costs by not having you work as long a school year. So you lost pay, but you didn't work as long a year. It's sort of like, and it's a temporary measure, just like what Kenny's describing his colleagues are experiencing, a kind of a furlough for a few weeks, if you will.
And you don't go into work.
Yeah, you don't work.
And for those of us educators that would have those furlough days, that meant children would not go to school. And if children didn't go to school, a lot of our families could not afford a child care provider or, a babysitter. They had to take their kids to work, or they had other socio-emotional issues where they couldn't, deal with their child all day long, or their living situation. If they're, if you have a flat where you're living with 2, 3 other families and they have kids as well, I mean, you're just right there crowded. And I can only imagine what's going on, that you're not supposed to be going out during this time. Well, at least not in public with other people, right? And we live in a city, in an urban setting, the kids that are being cooped up today. And so I'm just thinking about the families that many of your colleagues have, or even out, not just in your restaurant, but other restaurants as well, where people who are working in the service industry, where they have to be at home with their kids or take care of their kids, or figure out what to do with their kids because they don't have the means to like a wealthy person to provide entertainment, academics, whatever it is that you need.
Yeah.
I'm here supporting my brother with my nephew. He's lucky he has me, but I mean, all day it's a challenge being with a child. So I can only imagine what it's like for the rest of the families.
And I mean, some of these people also depend like on at least one of their kids' meal, being provided at school. Like today, I just, before we recorded this, I came back from like passing out food, that one of my friends was able to secure, like donations, and we were able to bring, a bag of, food for, like 20 families. But that's just, a tiny, number when you think about the whole district, right? Like in the Bay Area and this nation. There is so many people, in trouble. Like food security is a big issue.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Although here in San Francisco there are free food for free meals at certain sites, but that still does not cover, how many meals a day you have, right? There are meals. I'm not sure if they just provide breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
But if we look about the nation, not everyone is doing that, and all of our counties here in the Greater Bay Area.
But it's also about access to information. Not everyone knows this. It's also about pride, because that's one of the myths about especially the Latino community, that some people like to perpetuate, that we depend on fucking the welfare system. Now, other people are fucking proud. And they don't want to ask for help, and they want to try to figure it out before they go to the last resort. Now, a lot of people that are receiving this food, they're asking me, is it from the government? Like, I don't want help from the government, because some people may be residents, and, this administration, threatening to, make it difficult for people to pursue a path to citizenship if you receive, help from the government. And so, yeah, I mean, so yeah, there is this food in San Francisco, but the crisis that we're facing, there is not enough food, because the way that depends on a lot of, benevolence, and the scale that we're talking about. We are starting something big, and I don't think those systems are going to be able to survive. And for long, without something drastic changing. Because as it is, a lot of homeless people don't get a bed in this city. They don't always get a meal. And so add more people basically facing that, near destitution. So there will be a big, overload of the whatever little welfare system there is, and it's mostly community organizations, not the government. There's a lot of churches, there's a lot of community people, So yeah.
So what do you think should be or should have been the response? Because obviously the mayor of this city and all these counties basically declared quarantine. But didn't really have a plan.
Which was the strictest of all the nation. This was the most strictest shelter in place. This area was the most strictest in all of the nation.
Yeah. What do you feel like should have been done in response to this?
I mean, if they understood or care at least about, if they understood the condition of the working people in this city, and the potential mess that it was going to create, they should have frozen rents or costs,
right.
Bills, everything.
Yep.
Because, and they may have to still, just to save capitalism, literally, because otherwise people are going to say, fuck it. Because where are you going to get money if you're not working? And are you going to evict everyone, especially during a crisis that, has the potential of being very deadly?
Yeah, I do think that.
So
mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, some countries, I know the country where I was born, the president, who's a fucking asshole too, he just declared that a freeze on bills. No one's gonna pay for electricity, water, a bunch of shit.
Yeah. And
we're still moneying that shit. We're gonna send $1,000 so people can, that doesn't begin to cover the need of people.
No.
And they already have another check in the works, and they're gonna have to dump a bunch of money. And any economists will tell you that they're also kicking a can down the road, the can of inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And within these models, and that has the potential of just collapsing economies. It's being artificially created in countries like Venezuela, and other enemies of the USA. That they used to say how socialism is really bad and shit. But we are facing that here, and we might face that very soon. And so again, when inflation takes root, people don't give a shit about. They won't give a shit about the dollar. Maybe I'm being an alarmist, whatever. But it's a possibility.
No,
alternative means of exchange.
Yeah, there's this story. This was stories prior to World War I of people. I think it was prior to World War I of people in Germany carrying around whatever their currency in wheelbarrows because it had been devalued, and I think that is a concern. I mean, I think they've just pumped what I've heard anywhere from $2.2 trillion to $5 trillion with the plans of that into the stock market and into the economy. And I don't think they really know where all this leads.
Yeah, no, they just focusing on the immediate. And that's kind of what happened in 2008. Actually, I remember Bush in 2001 when they started giving people some money, but this isn't mass because the supply chains are disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has the potential of evolving, and I think they're going to try to address that later. But I guess this is another Marxist, point that capitalism, by saving itself, creates worse conditions for the next crisis.
Mm-hmm.
They basically ran out of room at the Fed to decrease the interest rates before this shit happened.
Yeah.
And so now they're basically about to give away money for free. Pay to banks. That's the next step. Pay banks to receive the money.
Right.
Because after zero, there's negative. So then the federal government, has to pay. And if any government that has had issues with inflation knows that by printing money, which is basically what they're literally doing, you increase in inflation.
Yeah. Well, I think the goal or the hope, I think, in each of these countries, because one of the things that I've been reading about comparing the economic crisis in 2008 to this one is how in 2008 a lot of the countries came together to try to figure out how we're going to which banks are going to be shut down, how are we going to bail each other out. But in this time, it's everyone for themselves. And United States, China, even within Europe, all that is supposedly united around European Union. Each of these countries, in the response to the crisis, is trying to figure out its own plan. And again, this is part of what the rising nationalism and the kind of situation where you're going to try to figure out how do I make my opponent pay for this crisis more than myself, so that I defeat them. And the U.S. has really started gearing that up with language about trying to become self-sufficient. What was the recent act they passed? I can't remember what it was called.
The military, like the wartime act or something?
Yes, let me get the exact name of it. Hold on. The Defense Production Act, which is really, ostensibly it's about being the U.S. becoming self-sufficient and developing medical equipment, things like that. But it's also microchips and electronics, and it's really about saying we are going to make sure, the government is going to make sure that the United States is the producer of these things, and we're not just going to let corporations do whatever. They're not going to go wherever they want. And it's really about the kind of state capitalism that we started to see prior to World War II, where the governments and the corporations become kind of fused interests, and the governments try to essentially run capitalism within their country, so it's best fit to compete with the other countries. And again, these are the pressures that are leading towards this economic crisis, which people expected, but apparently it took this pandemic to kind of kickstart it. Has sort of exposed these sorts of fractures that are going up between nations, and it's very dangerous. It's the pressures towards World War III, and we're already looking like we're entering conditions that are similar to like a new Cold War with China.
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe this sounds arrogant, but a lot of people naively think that this will end in like a more united world. But when our governments are capitalist governments, like you said, it actually very likely to tighten the grip of like right-wing nationalists, the strongman winning, and leading the people through crisis. Yeah. And especially when we're not organized, right, to be able to take over, the supply chains and means of production, to be able to sustain life. Yeah. The most basic, fundamental thing. Then, we talked about it, I think, a little bit. It's everyone for themselves, Then the guns do become dangerous against, one another. Yeah. They're not because they're not being pointed at our capitalist government.
Yeah. And hidden within this experience, though, is the notion that if workers, like what amount of power workers could wield in shutting the entire system down if they can do it on their own terms. I think there is that element within this experience. Of course, this is not how this is not worker organized, this is state organized, but hidden within this is how much power the working class has to take everything offline, and then they can choose what goes up and what goes down. So there is a lesson to be learned, but it's we're a long way away from that. And just to say, we've been talking about France and the yellow vests. I read an article about this, that there actually still are yellow vest protests, but they're very small. And those protests were deemed illegal in the context of the coronavirus, and they went ahead and had a protest of a few hundred people. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of clarity to still go forward with that. But you can see the impact that this stuff has had globally on. Just only a month ago or so, me and Eduardo, and maybe even you, Kenny, we were having episodes about the global movements that were taking over, and this is a stake in the heart against them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Eduardo, if you want to jump in, but
well, I'm just going to say that people have been fined recently. I was talking to my friends there, and they've been telling me that now the police are out on the streets of Madrid, really making sure that they're not supposed to leave. It's not optional. You're not. And then, what was it? 2 nights ago? 2 nights ago, I was looking at Macron. He was ordering as well the same thing. He said young people are not paying attention. So first it was Italy, then it's Spain, and now it's France. So the government is going after people who are not obeying the imposed orders. Such as curfew hours and certain activities, and even Belgium is doing the same, and they're not being allowed unless they have a specific paper that has access. It just sort of felt a little bit Orwellian to me, the entire thing. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, because we were talking, the three of us, that I might just go. Before they decided to close the border, I said I would go to France, and then after I heard of all this, I don't think I want to be in a situation like that where I don't have access to even leave to go out on the corner just without having a permit.
Yeah.
Man,
It's very Orwellian.
I mean, I definitely think that, I mean, obviously, we lack perspective, from this. We're still in it, but we are maybe living in an era of the reaffirmation of the state over people.
Yeah.
Because, in some degree, people, there wasn't rest. It wasn't organized, to be able to really challenge the powers that be. But like you said, a lot of places in Latin America, which is where I pay attention to, at least 8-10 countries were uprising against the government, or there was unrest. And so again, this is the governments are not going to let go of the opportunity of reasserting themselves under populations under the guise of protecting you, even though they themselves have left us vulnerable.
Yep.
And I think that just connected to here, San Francisco, and I hope, again, I don't know if that will be the route that this will take. I hope that the lesson that we get out of this is that we are on our own. Like workers, these fuckers left us unprotected. And we are pulling out. We are gonna have to pull out of this together, collective. And I've seen some people starting to organize some funds and stuff. Obviously, that's far from what we need. But I hope that we learn the lesson that we are on our own and that we need to organize in mass. And so we can ourselves protect ourselves from future shit like this.
And a key part of that unity is going to be workers who are citizens building solidarity with workers who are not.
Yeah.
If we are not able to do that, then we're not going to be able to do this. And there are some ideas I have for things that are ways we can do that in this next few weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about them until there's other things that happen.
All right. Well, I'll just add lastly on what we're talking about as well. It's not just the curfews and the imposed regulations. It's as well as the massive surveillance that will now happen because most people are working remotely and have to go to a specific apps. Zoom, we're on one right now, Skype, and then the future of online learning, which we won't discuss in detail now, but I'm just touching a little bit on it just to say that it's not just about the educational system that will change, as well as the workforce. And this will all be in the hands of corporations that will obviously be as well in cahoots with the government to have massive surveillance on the rest of us. Just before this call, there were other people today in this household that were on conference calls, checking in with their friends. And I have another friend that was as well doing a Netflix friend watching, where they can watch the same film together as a family or as friends together, something like that. I'm not sure the details, but it's now streaming line services that now have this access to conference or video chat ways of connecting to one another. And I think that technology has been a great force, but it also is going to be our what's the opposite of great force? Andy, you know the expression, a great force, or could be our defeat, I think it is.
Yeah, well,
but
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, the point is that it's not just I was just trying to say it's not just about not being able to go out on the streets. It's also about fear-mongering. Everyone, I think I have been the one out of the three of us that have been very cautious not to undermine the way that the pandemic has been in the media. But I think in this episode, I'm feeling that from everything I'm listening to, that the government really is using this as an excuse. I think it's important to be cautious, as I have sort of was arguing with you both the last two times. But in this episode, I'm feeling that it is very much like the government's way of excusing itself for why it's doing certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I see it more and more, the creeping, the slight, cheeky ways of getting into our lives with every means necessary through permits and surveillance and more cameras and more apps and more. It's just the surveillance state is growing. And so I'm just feeling like, how do we counter that with the importance of being hygienic and the importance of also communicating the necessity for us to be to take care of ourselves? We need to have that information, but we don't need it to be diluted, as I also said last time, with not just conspiracies, as I'm not going to talk about this time, but diluted with supposedly more nanny watching from the government.
Yeah.
That I feel is being diluted in there as well. The government is slowly and just persuading people, to accept. We're doing this for your own good.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And it's like right there watching us. You know? It's
I mean,
so.
That was the argument I think Lipson and I, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, were making about the media. That's a function to tell you that, fear is part of that function, right? Like to scare you to the point that, we need the government. That we need to believe that lie. Like especially these capitalist assholes who have put us in a vulnerable situation. Again, people that, don't have housing, or are being threatened. Obviously, you're gonna want to keep working as much as you can, but otherwise you probably go home. All right, at the first sign of being sick, and again, putting people in vulnerable situations is not just the coronavirus. The simple flu could kill a lot of people. A lot of vulnerable people that we're trying to protect right now worldwide. But this shouldn't be just because of the coronavirus. The securing the people's livelihoods, dignity and just the basic things, food, what do you call, a roof on your head and all the healthcare, but obviously it's all for sale. So,
yeah.
Well, I couldn't have said it better than the both of y'all said it. So, I mean, I very much agree with what you're saying, Eduardo, about the perniciousness of the surveillance state. I almost feel like they're not moving slowly. Actually, they feel like they're moving rapidly. But I really agree. And
well, I meant in the underlying messages.
Yeah,
I suppose maybe they are.
Yeah. But no, I really agree with what you said. So, I would would just say to people, wash your hands and then go read Communist Manifesto.
Yep.
On a more personal note, how are you holding up on your time being quarantined?
Me, on my end?
Yeah.
Brandy's getting sick of me. She's tired of me.
Brandy, for our viewers and listeners, is Andy's partner.
She's like, when are you going to leave? When is the quarantine going to be up to get you out?
And Kenny, what are you doing? You were saying you were delivering food, Kenny.
Yeah, I mean, taking as much precautions, because actually a lot of the people that I've been delivering to are some of the most vulnerable people over 60. Like, a lot of my mother's coworkers, who are in a unionized hotel with a fucking union that never, fought when they had to, so they're basically unemployed. And, most of them are elders. And so, I had to procure food for them, and obviously taking precautions, not because I don't want to be, the cause of their, demise, but someone's got to do this shit because no one else coming, the fucking government ain't coming, and so they're talking in public about fucking saving them, protecting them, but in reality they're leaving them to starve. and like they've always had. Like we know that in poverty among like elders is very high in this nation compared to any other industrialized nation. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And again, trying to be cautious. I have a mother. She's 64. She's pretty healthy, but again, I don't want to be the reason, that she gets sick and this shit happens. So yeah, been doing deliveries, but I put shit on the ground and remind them to wash everything that I give them. Wash their hands before they put anything in their mouths. I don't get near them. Some of them have health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But again, these fuckers ain't knocking at the door with food for them.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Eduardo?
Well, I'm cooking all day, so I'm spending time cooking. We don't go out for takeout or home or rather, I just don't do takeout food normally. But I have more time to cook greater meals and not just fast meals that sort of are bland. So I have time to cook for that, as well as I'm catching up on my writing. And I'm really behind, but now I'm able to catch up on my writing and studying as well. So and helping out with my nephew, which is I hope that
I'm disgusted by privileged people.
Look at us. We're lazing around. Kenny's out there doing the good deeds.
All right. So why don't we wrap up? Yeah, let's just say goodbye. All right. So for any of our listeners and viewers, they can check us out on any of our 5 platforms on BitChute, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes Podcasts, or YouTube. Subscribe, rate, review, and best of all, share with your family and community. Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Kenny, and thank you, Kenny, for what you're doing out there. And keep us up to date what's happening with you. All right. So this will end the call.
All right.
All right, guys.
See you guys.
Ciao.
This is what's left, Eduardo. A weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left.
Wait, what's the don't ever say my line ever in your life again.
Oh my God!
I copyrighted that
I know.
It's patent. All right.
So whenever you're ready.